invulnerable.
Alright, good evening Earth, this is Adam Sturch broadcasting from the Mushroom Mansion, Taos, New Mexico, working on oil painting cain.
In Kennedy's mind,
and I've figured out what this upper right hand composition is going to be and how it's going to go and the way the rest of the painting is going to open up. Alright, so from here, we're going to have a wall, a wavy wall that ends kind of probably at his head crumbling. I'm going to have a dog with a cop with a gun or a stick or something terrorizing a child in silhouette similar to these right here. It's like the dog's kind of already there. Little guy, little kid, wall. And then on this side and through behind them, I'm going to continue the crowd to wrap around them. And then the crowd will fade into a landscape that will go back behind his head and open up as a burning cityscape that goes right here. But that's all going to take a lot of time. For right now, we're just going to do cop, dog, kid, wall. Okay, here we go.
There is an
zoom in a little
between the two threats.
There.
If by some miracle we escape nuclear disaster, and incidentally, a review of the record, which again I urge you to undertake, reveals that it is indeed a near miracle that we've escaped this far.
This is fun. All right.
But if we somehow escape, at least we know in principle how to end the plague. We can, in principle, eliminate nuclear weapons. And that's advocated by figures who are hardly doves, like Henry Kissinger and Reagan Secretary of State George Shultz, the Senate's former leading specialist on nuclear weapons, Sam Nunn, William Perry, well-known former Defense Secretary, leading specialist on nuclear security. That's nuclear weapons. Global warming is different. It's inexorable. And we might pass a point of no return soon, in fact, when the damage that we have done is uncontrollable. Well, looking over this situation, we see that the human species is now undertaking an experiment to answer Meyer's question. Is it better to be smart than stupid? And to examine the course of the experiment, let's just sample a few facts. So let me begin with a recent report, last couple of weeks, in the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists. It's the main source for high-level strategic analysis on these issues. There's a recent report in March on the vast nuclear modernization program that was initiated by Obama and is now being expanded under Trump. The report discusses how U.S. nuclear force modernization is undermining the strategic stability on which survival suspends by a very slender thread. I'll quote them. The current modernization programs include revolutionary new technologies that will vastly increase the targeting capability of the U.S. ballistic missile arsenal. This increase in capability is astonishing, boosting the overall killing power of existing U.S. ballistic missile forces by a factor of roughly 3, and it creates exactly what one would expect to see if a nuclear-armed state were planning to have the capacity to fight and win a nuclear war by disarming enemies with a surprise first strike. Russians, of course, know this very well, even without reading the article. Going on with the article, U.S. submarines now patrol with more than 3 times the number of warheads needed to destroy the entire fleet of Russian land-based missiles in their silos. U.S. submarine-based missiles can carry multiple warheads, so hundreds of others now in storage could be added to the submarine-based missile force making it all the more lethal. All of this has revolutionary impact on military capabilities and important implications for global security. The implications, in fact, are very clear. Russian strategic analysts are, of course, aware that the United States, thanks to these modernization programs, now has the capacity to wipe out their deterrent in a first strike. NATO forces are carrying out provocative maneuvers right at the Russian border. In fact, both sides are carrying out provocative actions. The Russians do not have our sophisticated satellite-based advanced warning systems. They have limited information time if there's a possible attack. And with the Russian deterrent at serious risk because of the nuclear modernization programs, at a moment of crisis, and there are many possibilities, Russian leaders might very well be tempted to undertake a preemptive strike just to have a chance for survival. And that's an act that would end organized human life on Earth. We know that. That's one of many examples of how close we are to answering Ernst Mayr's question, and again, it receives approximately zero attention outside of highly specialized circles. Well, once again, we can ask whether a diplomatic avenue is possible. It surely seems so. Is it being pursued? Not a slightest indication of it, or even discussion of it, exactly like the cases that I was discussing earlier, back to the beginning of the nuclear age. It's not the only case. Right now, if you turn on the television set, you see the frightened debates about the North Korean nuclear threat. North Korea may be poised to launch another nuclear weapon. The North Korean threat is regarded as one of the most severe in the world, and forceful measures are now being considered, in fact being prepared, that could have disastrous consequences. Well, again, is there a possible diplomatic path? Actually, China and North Korea have proposed a negotiated agreement. North Korea will place all nuclear weapons programs on hold, will terminate them, and in return, the United States will end hostile military maneuvers on the North Korean border, including flights by nuclear-capable B-52s. And North Koreans, of course, have memories of having had the country completely flattened by U.S. bombing 60 years ago. Well, is that option worth pursuing? Evidently not, for Washington at least. Any thought of exploration of that path has been forcefully rejected, again with scarcely a word of criticism. Well, there's no time to review the history, but you can do it, it's public. In recent years, there have been several very promising opportunities for agreement to end North Korean nuclear programs, in each case undermined by aggressive U.S. actions. All of this is quite relevant to Mayr's question. Well, let's turn to the other existential threat. On global warming, anyone who's not living under a rock should be aware that the dangers are severe and imminent. So how are we reacting? Here's a recent report from the business press. The oil boom is back. The number of oil and gas rigs drilling in the U.S. has almost doubled since bottoming out at the lowest level in more than 75 years of records. While 24 nations are coordinating to cut oil production and rein in the global supply glut, U.S. producers are moving in the opposite direction. Over the last 4 months, output increased, of fossil fuels that is, increased by over 500,000 barrels a day. If that rate expansion continues, the shale boom will break new production records by summer. The U.S. now produces 9 billion barrels a day, a record. That illustrates a crucial fact of current history. While the world is taking halting steps towards facing the existential challenge to survival, the U.S., virtually alone, is racing towards destruction, and doing so with enthusiasm and dedication. Well, the oil industry, of course, has plenty of help coming from you. The International Monetary Fund reports that the fossil fuel industry manages to extract a $700 billion annual taxpayer subsidy. That's known as the free market here. And the industry doesn't take chances. In last year, 2016, it spent $117 million in campaign contributions while fielding 720 lobbyists in Washington to make sure that Congress gets the message. Better do what we want. And apparently, Congress does. There's a recent study in the Washington Post of Republicans in Congress, and it says many Republicans in Congress, contrary to what the leadership says, do recognize the severe threat of climate change, but they won't talk about it because of funding pressures from the fossil fuel industry. This is particularly true since the Citizens United ruling of the Supreme Court opened the doors even wider for a flood of corporate political funding, which means you toe the corporate line or you're out. Actually, these reports from the press are quite typical of the daily fare. Won't sample any more of them, but you can see them every time you open the press. Well, let's continue to review the experiment that humans are undertaking. Just pick a couple of recent dates. Let's take last November 8th. 3 events took place last November 8th. One of them was very important. One was extremely important, and the third was utterly astonishing. The least of the 3, the least important, was the election in the United States. Plenty of publicity, important, but the least important of the 3. The more important by far of the 3 took place in Morocco. In Marrakesh, Morocco, about 200 nations were participating in a UN-sponsored international conference, COP22 it was called, which was an attempt to put some teeth in the Paris negotiations on climate change of the preceding year. It had been hoped at Paris that they could reach a verifiable treaty on actions to address climate change, but that couldn't be done because of a single barrier. It's called the Republican Party. The Republican Congress in the United States would not accept any verifiable agreement. So Paris negotiations ended with just verbal commitments. The Morocco conference was an attempt to go beyond that. And as it began, it was moving in that direction. On November 8th, there was a report by the World Meteorological Organization. Quoting it, it confirms that 2016 was the warmest year on record, a remarkable 1.1 degrees centigrade above the pre-industrial period, sharply above the previous record set in 2015, approaching the desired upper limit set in Paris, and goes on with other dire reports. Now, that was November 8th. At that point, the deliberations ended. The electoral results came in from the United States, and the meeting shifted to another question. Can the world survive when the richest, most powerful country in world history with comparable advantages not only is withdrawing from the effort to try to save the world from destruction, but is undertaking a dedicated commitment to race to the precipice as quickly as possible.
Alright, that didn't take too terribly long. So put in 2 cops, scared kid, big dog, wall, razor wire.
China.
And that will lead into the next scene. And I don't know. Oh, I got 12 minutes. I guess I could throw in some audience over his shoulder. But I'm going to muse on that before I stab. And just leave it for this for now and splice this video onto the post that I put up earlier in the day. So anyway, we'll pick this up from here probably tomorrow and see where it goes. Thanks for watching. That's Adam Sturch broadcasting from the Mushroom Mansion, Taos, Mexico, working on oil painting Cain. Have a good night.
And the reaction here, take a look back, total silence. Utter